Okay. A minute. Okay. With the Abish's help, today's Masechta Bava Basra Daf Ayin Tes, and I'm going to start at the bottom of Ayin Tes Amid Beis, Ayin Ches Amid Beis. So I just want to point out because we're going to come. Hi, how are you? Just began. We're on Ayin Ches Amid Beis, about 3 lines from the bottom. But the point I want to bring out over here is because we're going to discuss this a lot. The Mishnah said that if someone sells, let's say, a pit, does the only mention the word pit? Is the water included in the sale? Or if you sell a beehive, the hive itself, are the bees included in the sale? So the Mishnah, or you sell a dove coat, a birdhouse. Are the birds included in the sale? So the Mishnah says yes. Okay, and that's very important. What our whole exercise of our Gemara today will be show that our Mishnah is not according to everybody. It's according to one opinion. That's all. But anyway, before we begin, we're just gonna close off what we learned yesterday about the Gemara was darshaning a pasuk, and the Gemara is darshaning the pasuk of Alkein Yomru Hamoishlim. It's a big long pasuk. So the Gemara darshans 3 lines from the bottom of Daf Ayin Ches Amid Beis. Bale Bomais Arnain. So the Gemara says, Elu Galse Ruach. These are people with a bloated ego. Okay? And what happens to a person with a oversized ego? The Hamamar, we learned, Kol Odom Sheyesh Boy Gasas Ruach. Any person who has an inflated ego, Neufel beGehenim, falls into Gehenim. You have to know what do you mean you fall into Gehenim? But that's what the Gemara says. Vaniram. So what does it mean? Vaniram, they became elevated. Amar Rasha, an evil person says, Ein Ram. There's nothing elevated. In other words, what does it mean? There's nothing elevated. That means there is no God, so to speak. There's nothing above. Avad cheshboin. There's lost any accounting in this world. Avad cheshboin shel olam. Russia will say that there's no judge and there's no judgment. So that's people unfortunately go through life and they see so much of that of people getting away with things. You could walk away and say, oh, there is no judge. But the pasuk says ad divine. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Hamtein, wait a little bit. Ad sheyaveh din, judgment will eventually come. You have to be patient, and you will see it. Venashim, with the Gemara Dasim, Venashim ad noifach, ad shetavai eish she'enet tzrichin epuach, an eish that doesn't need to be flamed. It's going to be hot enough that it's going to burn them. Ad meidva, ad shetadev nishnasma, until it causes pain for their neshama. Va'amri lei, another said, ad the aved ma'itaboy, until the person did what he wanted to do. In other words, Kadosh Baruch Hu knows, it does what he wants to do in the future world. There has to be another world. And this Olam Hazeh is not the end of the story. Because in this world, the way of Rishoyim are very successful. And the whole point is that there's some people are so severe Rishoyim that they cannot get punished in this world. Like Stalin or whatever, so they can't get. So they have to believe that everything that they see and all the covet that they get, it's only in this world. But next world, you'll see all the Gehenim that they're going to get. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav, call hapoirish midivrei Torah. Anybody who stops learning, right? You decide that you don't have enough time for it, so you separate yourself from learning. Eisha chaltai, a fire will destroy you. Shnema, v'nesati es pone behem, me'esh yatsu ve'esh dechlem. They ran away from the fire, which the Torah is Eish, and God said, and Eish will destroy them. Again, without learning, it's very hard to have a life. Anybody who separates himself from learning, Neufel beGehenim will falling into Gehenim. Shnema, Odom Toya Miderach Haskel. he moves away from the intelligent way. Mikal Rafoim Yanuach. He's going to end up in the congregation of Refoim. They Refoim Gehenim, and Refoim refers to Gehenim. Shnema lo yada ki Refoim sham beimke shal kru'ah. The weak people, the people who gave in to the Yetzer Hara are Refoim, and they end up in the deepest Gehenim. So again, the Gemara just darshans a pasuk that whoever separates himself from the words of the Torah and doesn't dedicate time to learn Torah will fall into Gehenna. Okay, now the Gemara continues. We learned in the Mishnah that if you sell a pit, the water is included. If you sell a garbage pail, the refuse in the garbage pail is included. Again, you sell a birdhouse, the birds are included. So the Gemara is just going to go on one long thing just to prove that that opinion is only one opinion. Nobody, and there's another opinion, there's another side to the story that holds that when you sell a pit, the water is not included. Let's see. Tanan Hassam, we learned in over there. We learned in a Mishnah, Kol haroyu lamizbeach. Here we're discussing if someone makes hegdish, he makes something holy. So there are three types of making things holy. You could say, I'm making holy an animal. That means that you're going to bring that animal as a sacrifice, as a carbon. Then you're going to say, I'm donating, paint or sheetrock or whatever it is. So then everybody knows you don't bring that on the mizbech. That's called a kachi beda kabayis. Okay? A kachi beda kabayis means something that could be used in the fixing of the Beis Hamikdash. It could be used in the construction. And then you could donate things that really it itself cannot be used as construction, but you can sell it and make the donation to the Beis Hamikdash. And that could be used for kachi beda kabayis. For example, if you donate like a cheese, you make a hegdish cheese. So cheese, you sell the cheese, and the cheese becomes, you sell the cheese, and the money becomes goes into the treasury of the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so Tanan Hassam, we learned over the if you made something holy for the Mizbeach, and it's not worthy of the Beda Kabayis, so it's the highest holiness. Lebeda Kabayis v'loy leMizbeach. Or it's an item that could be used for the fixing of the Beis Hamikdash, but not for the Mizbeach. Right? For example, gold and silver and precious stones, those are not used on the mizbeach, but those are used in the Beis Hamikdash itself. Let's say I make a donation, loyla mizbeach or loyla beda kabayis, something that cannot be used for the mizbeach and not for beda kabayis. For example, milk and cheese. Okay, so whatever it is, I make a holy. If they're two separate items, let's say the item that I'm making holy has two parts to it, like we're learning in the Mishnah. So is the part that's inside of it included into the hegdish? So the answer is yes. No matter what type of hegdish that you make, it becomes hegdish, and you could have me'ila if you violate it, you get a big avera. And not only that, you violate also what's inside of it. What's inside of it also becomes hegdish. So if you want to understand it, ketzat. The Mishnah gives you an example. Higdish bor melea mayim. If I made a bar full of water, hegdish, and I only said I'm making the pit hegdish. Remember, I'm only saying I'm making the pit hegdish. Is the water included in the hegdish? So that's the case. Ashpais melea zevel. I make a garbage pail full of refuse. Shoivach, a birdhouse, malayanim that's full of doves. Sada, if I make a field hagdish, but it's malay asavim, it's full of grass. So is the item that's inside of the item that you made hagdish also hagdish? Ilun nasi peris. Let's say I make a tree hagdish, but the tree has fruits on the tree. Are the fruits hagdish? My alam behen umaisum seicham. I make mi'ila in them, and what's inside of it, right? Whatever inside of it also becomes hegdish. Avol, says the Gemara, higdish bar. Let's say I made a bar hegdish. Okay, it was an empty pit when I made it hegdish. And then water came down into the pit of hegdish. So then that water is not holy. Ashpa, let's say a garbage pail. And then afterwards, people put stuff into it, refuse in it. Shoivach, let's say I made an empty bird house hegdish. And then birds came there. Yoinim. Elon, let's say I made a tree hegdish, and there was no fruits on the tree. And then afterwards, Nasa Paris, then fruits grew on the tree. So that if I made a field hegdish, then grass grew. So first I made the field hegdish, and then the secondary item came about into existence. So the Mishnah says, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is, my alam behem, the thing that you made hegdish is hegdish. There is mila. Whatever is inside of it is not hegdish. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. This is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Whatever is inside of it is not hegdish. Rabbi Yossi says, Hamagdish es hasoda v'seilam. Someone makes a field or a tree hegdish. So then, my alam be'en uvugduleihem. Rabbi Yossi says that you get mila on its and whatever grows from it. So if a tree, you made hegdish a tree, and then afterwards fruits grew on the tree, or a field, and then afterwards produce grew on the field, everything is hegdish because nehem shehem kedulei hegdish, because they grew out of a field or a tree that is hegdish. Okay. Rabbi Yossi only spoke about a field and a tree. He did not speak about a pit and a like a birdhouse. Rabbi Yehuda spoke about 4 cases: a bor, ashba, ilan, and sada. Right, and he says always ma'alam behen, and not what's inside of it, not what comes later. Rabbi Yossi says by the last 2, ilan and sada. Rabbi Yossi says you are moil what it and whatever grows on it, because it's gidule hegdish, grew from hegdish. Tanya, so the Gemara is going to point out something strange. Tanya, we learned in a brisa. Amar Rebbe said, Nivra and Rabbi Yehuda. I like Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, but bar v'shoivach. By bar v'shoivach, we say that me'alim behen ve'ein me'alim b'masha b'soichem. That's I pass like Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to a pit and a birdhouse. But Nivra and Rabbi Yossi, but I pass like Rabbi Yossi b'sada ve'ilim by a field and a tree. That by field and a tree, I'll go with Rabbi Yossi's opinion, ma'alam behen, and whatever comes later. Says the Gemara, Haimai, what did Rebbe mean to say? Bishlama nirin divrei Yehuda bebar v'shayvach. I like Rabbi Yehuda's opinion by bar v'shayvach, because Rabbi Yehuda had 4 opinions. He said 4 positions: bar, shayvach, and ilan and sada. So Rabbi Yehuda, Rebbe liked Rabbi Yehuda's opinion only by bar and shayvach. Michlal the So it must be that Rabbi Yehuda disagreed by Sada v'Elam. As you can see, by Sada v'Elam, Yehuda says ma'alam behen ve'ein ma'alam basha b'sayichan, and Rabbi says I don't like that opinion. I don't hold like that opinion. Ella nirin divrei Rabbi Yossi b'Sada v'Elam, by saying you paskin like Rabbi Yossi b'Sada v'Elam, it must be that what would be Rabbi Yossi's opinion be by bor and shayvach? What would be his opinion? You would be ma'al ben umasha b'soichan. He would also everything, just like Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is ma'al ben ve'ein ma'al b'soichan by 4 things. Would Rabbi Yossi also be that way? Ma'al ben umasha b'soichan, even by a bor and a birdhouse. Bichlal bepalit bavar v'shayvach. Are you going to tell me that Rabbi Yossi argued by bar v'shayvach? For Rabbi Yossi, Sada v'Elam kama. Rabbi Yossi was only mentioned a Sada v'Elam. He didn't mention anything about bar v'shayvach. But he table the door of the Rabbi Yehuda kama. He argues on everything, but he just goes on Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, and he's trying to say, even Rabbi Yehuda, you should agree with me, at least by Sada v'Elam. I hold by all 4 of them. But at least agree with me, Sada v'Elam. No, but Rabbi Yossi agrees with Rabbi Yehuda by bar v'shayvach. But Tanya, we learned in a brisa, Amar Rabbi Yossi, Ein ani roya divrei Rabbi Yehuda b'sada v'Elam, v'pnei shein kedula hegdish, b'sada v'Elam hu de'ein roya, Abba bar v'shayach roya. Rabbi Yossi said quite clearly that with bar and a shayvach, he would agree with Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. He would agree with Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. So why did Rebbe say, I like Rabbi Yossi's opinion, only what he says by Sada v'Elam? Rabbi Yossi is only talking about Sada v'Elam, so something's wrong with the wording of Rebbe. So answers the Gemara, you're right, you have to change around the words of Rebbe. Hachi kamar, this is the psak. Dirim divrei Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yossi b'bar v'shavach. When it comes to I like Rabbi Yehuda's words, Rabbi Yossi agreed with Rabbi Yehuda by bar v'shoivach. Rabbi Yossi agreed with Rabbi Yehuda by bar v'shoivach that normally you would think Rabbi Yossi holds me'alim behen u'masha b'soichan. So Rabbi Yossi would align himself with Rabbi Yehuda's opinion by bar v'shoivach. Sha'af Rabbi Yossi lenechlek olav ela b'sad v'ilam. Rabbi Yossi only argued by sad v'ilam. There you would say because it grows from the ground of Hegdish, that's why it remains holy. But a pit full of water or a birdhouse full of birds, the birds did not grow from the house. The water didn't come from the walls of the pit. It came from later. Therefore, then you would say, you wouldn't say, okay, so therefore, he would agree to Rabbi Yehuda. Tana Rabbanim. Okay, that was just housekeeping. Tana Rabbanim, the rabbis taught, Hegdishan Reikan. Let's say I made a Hegdish when it was empty. Let's take example the pit. You made a Hegdish when it was empty. The brice, and then it got full of water. And then it got full. So maybe let's call it a field. Okay, let's call it a field and a tree. You made a tree hegdish, and then when it was empty, and then it got full of fruits. So my alam behen ve'ein ma'alam mashim b'soichan. The Tanna Kama holds, like Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, that your ma'alam behen, the tree remains holy, but not the fruits. Lazar Rab Shimon, Rab Shimon says, Af be'alam behen b'mashim b'soichan. You also, the fruits will also be holy. Oh, so this is what Amar Rabba. Rabba said, Ma chaloikis besada ve'ilat. Chaloikis would be by a field and a tree. The Tanna Kama sovel like Rabbi Yehuda. Tanna Kama holds like Rabbi Yehuda, my alim behen, and not what grows later. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Yossi, Shimon sovel like Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Lazar, Shimon holds like Rabbi Yossi, that by a tree and a field, so the fruits are growing from a tree that's already hegdish, so they also become hegdish. But a pit and a dove house, everybody would agree you get mila in them and not what's inside of it. So Rabbi Rabba stated clearly the machlokes in this brisa is really dependent on the versions of the Tanna Kama aligning himself with Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Lazar Shimon aligning himself like Rabbi Yossi. Amalei Abayas said, the way you're learning this, it wouldn't make sense. Another brisa. The other brisa says, Higdish Malayan. Let's say you made a tree, if you made it when it was full. So presumably it's talking about a tree full of fruits. Tanna Kama holds, yes, then the fruits are holy. Okay, that makes sense. But Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Shimon Machlif, he pivoted, he turned it around. He said, no, in that case, when you make it holy, when it's carrying fruits, the fruits are not holy. So if they're talking about a fruit tree that they're arguing about, B'sdei Ilan, B'sada v'Ilan, Amay Machlif. Why would Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Shimon, is that his name? Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Shimon change around his opinion. If it's a fruit tree that's full of fruits and you magnish it, why wouldn't the fruits become holy? Why would he change his opinion? Madach, when you magnish the tree and then it grows fruits, the fruits are holy. So certainly when you magnish a tree full of fruits, it should also be considered holy right away. So why would he change around his opinion? So Rabba has to figure out what the machlokes is between Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, and Tanna Kama, and it's talking about something else. Elo Rabba machlokes b'bar v'shoivach. They're arguing about a bar and shayvach. If it's a pit and a pit, a field and tree, a field and a tree, then everybody agrees. And what's inside of it, because everybody aligns themselves up with the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. But by bar v'shayvach, they disagree. So now, why is it? What is the argument based upon? Again, the Tanna Kama will hold Me'alim Behen and not what's inside of it. And then Rabbi Lazar Shimon says Me'alim Behen and what's inside of it, right? Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Shimon says Me'alim Behen and what's inside of it. Now the question is, if it's empty, they're arguing, and if it's a full pit of water, they're also arguing. So what is the machlokes about? So Breikonim Pligim, they're arguing like this. But Pluktet Rab Meir Rabbanim. they also the Tanakama and Rameir, they're arguing in the same machlokes of Rameir and Rabbanim. What does that mean? The Tanakama sovelak Rabbanim. The Tanakama hold like the Rabbanim. That you can't sell something that is non-existent, and you can't make something holy that's non-existent. So if I make a pit holy, so if the water comes later, that water is not holy because it wasn't there. It wasn't there when I first initiated the holiness on the pit, and you can't sell something that's non-existent. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon holds that it is holy. Savak Rameir holds like Rameir. The Amar a person could sell something that didn't come to this world. So according to Rameir, I could actually sell sell something that's eventually going to come. That whoever sells the fruit of a palm tree to his friend, even though the palm tree does not have fruits, the sale is valid according to Rameir. So same thing over here. I make a bar holy, and I probably meant to include eventual water that's going to end up in this bar. So that bar, that's why Rabbi Lazar, that also remains holy, because Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon aligns himself up with the opinion of Rameir that a person could sell something that's non-existent in this world already. So the Gemara says, wait a second. When does Rameir say a sale could be valid if something is not here in this world? What I mean? I'm selling you the fruits of a palm tree, and the palm tree did not produce the fruits yet. Rameir says that's a valid sale because I know for a fact that eventually this palm tree is going to give off fruit. So that's for Kagon Paris that cackled, it's for sure going to happen. But a pit full of water, that's eventually water going to come to it, it's not certain, it's not for sure that water is going to fill up this pit. So maybe Rameir would hold that in that case, and you can't make something holy that's non-existent. By a pit or by a birdhouse that's empty, how do you know birds are going to come into the house? How do you know water is going to come into the pit? Maybe Rameir will hold in that case that it doesn't work. So Amarava said, Mishkachas la b'mayim habam der chatzer laboy, v'yonim habam der shoivach l'shoivach. We know for sure that water is going to end up into this pit because we know that his courtyard is on an incline that draws all the rainwater that comes into the courtyard into that pit. So we know that pit is eventually going to be full of water. So, but when you made it holy, there was no water in the pit. So therefore, Tanakama holds that the water that comes into the pit is not holy. But Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon says, since it's eventually going to come into the pit, even though it's davar shaloi bala oilim, it didn't rain yet, but I know it's going to come into the pit, so then the hegdish is effectuated onto that water that eventually ends up in the pit. And same thing with an empty birdhouse. Even though right now there's no birds in the house, we're talking about a case where there's birds next door, and they're going to eventually fly to this birdhouse. So eventually it's going to be filled up. So it's eventually going to come. So even though when I made the birdhouse holy, there was no birds in it, but when the birds come into the house, into the birdhouse, they also become holy. That's Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon's opinion. But because they hold like a mayor, a person could sell something that's non-existent in this world already. But the Tanakama holds no. If it's non-existent in the world, there's no kedusha doesn't fall onto this thing. It wasn't here when you made it holy, so it's not going to be effectuated. Uva malaya my pligi, and let's say it was full. Let's say if the bar was full of water. So what is the argument? That the Tanakama holds the water is holy, but Rabbi Shimon pivoted and he said no, the water is not holy. So the answer is Amar Rava said bar stam. He made only the pit holy, right? Rabbi Lazar, so the Tanakama holds, of course, the water is included because the water is in the pit. Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon Sava la kavua. Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon holds like his father Reb Shimon. Da'amen donin din gvoya midin hedyet. You always learn hegdish from the transaction of making something holy is like somebody who sells something to something else. Ma din hedyet. When it comes to selling something, matzi amale, a person could say that when you sell a pit, beira zabina lach, my loy zabina lach. I'm only selling you the pit. I'm not selling you the water, because Reb Shimon's opinion is not like our Mishnah. Our Mishnah holds that if you make selling a pit, the water that's inside of it is included in the sale. Tanakama that Reb Shimon holds, and Reb Shimon is like his father. They hold that when a person sells, he sells ba'ayin ra. with the what he sells with the ayin raw, with a bad eye. He's only selling the pit. He's not selling the water. So that's the case by a regular business transaction, so same thing by a godly transaction. Beira Agdish, Bayala Agdish. You're only making the pit holy and not the water holy. So that is the opinion of Rab Shimon. Break the Gemara, and the Gemara. So the Gemara says, and therefore, Rab Shimon holds that if you make a pit full of water hegdish, you're only making the pit holy and not the water. And so the Gemara just pointed out, when a person sells a pit, is the water not included? But now we learned in the Mishnah, our Mishnah, Mocha Bar, if you sell a pit, Mocha Meimav, the water is included in the sale. So how could I mean, our Mishnah doesn't bring down a machlokes. It's true. Our Mishnah is one opinion, one lone opinion. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, the anonymous opinion is mocha bar. If you sell a pit, loy mocha meimav. You didn't sell the water. Rab Nassan was the one who said mocha bar, mocha meimav. When you sell a pit, you're selling the water with it. And our Mishnah is that lone opinion of Rab Nassan. If you sell a pit, the water goes with it. But the anonymous opinion is mocha bar, loy mocha meimav. And that is the opinion of Rab Shimon, and that's the opinion of Rab Elazar bar Rab Shimon. And the whole exercise of this Gemara was to show that our Mishnah is just the one lone opinion of Rab Nassan, but there are other people who argue on that idea. Okay, we'll stop here.